Alara Voss was 17 years old when she first saw Damien Ashgrave, and she never forgot the sight of him. He had been carried into her village on a makeshift stretcher, bleeding from wounds that should have killed him, his men shouting for a healer. Alara was only an apprentice then, still learning the old remedies from her mother, but she was the only one brave enough to step forward. She pressed her hands against his wound and refused to let him die. He lived, and in the weeks that followed, while he recovered in the small healer's cottage at the edge of her village, something happened between them that neither of them had planned. Damien was the Alpha King of the Blackthorn territories, ruler of a land held together by fragile treaties between shifter packs who had been enemies for generations. Alara was nobody, a girl from the lowest-ranked pack in his kingdom, and yet, when their eyes met, they both felt the same undeniable pull. A bond had formed, the kind of bond that could not be broken, no matter how impossible it seemed. For 3 months, they kept their love hidden. Damien could not yet claim her publicly. His court was waiting for him to marry Seraphine Cade, the daughter of a powerful northern pack, a marriage that had been arranged years earlier to keep the peace between two territories that had once gone to war. If Damien broke that arrangement, he risked plunging his kingdom back into conflict. So he and Alara met in secret, in quiet corners of the palace gardens, believing they had time to find a way through the tangle of politics and duty. They did not have time. Seraphine found out. Nobody ever learned exactly how, but one night Alara was dragged from her bed by soldiers she did not recognize, accused of crimes she had never committed. She was told she had stolen from the royal treasury, that she had used dark magic to bind the king against his will, that she was a danger to the kingdom. The soldiers were not there to arrest her. They were there to make sure she disappeared. Alara ran. She fled into the frozen borderlands with nothing but the clothes on her back, hunted by men loyal to a woman who wanted her gone. She did not know, in that desperate flight through the snow, that she was already carrying 2 lives inside her, Damien's twins. By the time she realized she was pregnant, she was already living among a nomadic group of wolves who existed outside the treaty system, wolves who owed no loyalty to any king or queen. They took her in without asking questions, and Alara did not tell them who she was, or who the father of her children might be. She simply became one of them, a healer, quiet and careful, who never spoke of her past. Back in the capital, Damien was told a different story. He was shown a letter, supposedly written by Alara, saying she had used him and was leaving to build a new life somewhere far away. He did not believe it at first. He searched for her in secret for months, sending trusted men to every village near the border. But the trail always went cold, and eventually, worn down by grief and the responsibilities of his kingdom, he stopped searching. He married Seraphine not long after, though he never truly loved her, and the mating bond he had shared with Alara left a wound in his chest that never fully closed. 16 years passed. Alara raised her children, a boy and a girl, in the shadow of mountains far from the palace where their father ruled. She named them Kale and Ren. They grew up strong and clever, unaware that they carried royal blood, unaware that the mating mark hidden beneath their collarbones connected them to a throne. Alara taught them how to hunt, how to heal, how to survive in a world that could turn cruel without warning. She never told them their father was a king. She told them only that he was gone, and that some things were better left in the past. But blood cannot stay hidden forever. As Kale and Ren grew older, strange things began to happen. Their shifts, when they finally came, were unlike anything the nomadic pack had ever seen. Their eyes carried a silver flicker that no ordinary wolf possessed. Word of 2 remarkable young shifters living beyond the treaty lines began to spread, quietly at first, then louder, until it reached ears in the capital that had been waiting 16 years for exactly this kind of rumor. Seraphine heard the whispers before Damien did. She had spent 16 years building a throne on secrets, and she knew immediately what those rumors meant. She sent men to find the twins, not to welcome them, but to silence them before the truth could threaten everything she had built. The attack came on a quiet evening, when Alara was preparing dinner and the twins were returning from the river. Strangers in dark cloaks moved through the camp, and only quick instincts and Alara's fierce determination kept her children alive. She fought harder than she ever had in her life, calling on every ounce of strength she had buried for 16 years. and when the attackers finally retreated, she knew there was no more hiding. That night, for the first time, she told Kale and Ren the truth. Their father was not gone. Their father was the Alpha King, and someone in his court wanted them dead. The twins listened in stunned silence, as their mother finally spoke of the past she had carried alone for so long. She told them about Damien, about the bond they had shared, about the night she was chased from the palace, while carrying them inside her. She told them everything, and when she finished, Ren asked the only question that mattered. "Are we going to hide forever?" Ilara looked at her children, now grown, now strong enough to stand beside her rather than behind her, and she shook her head. "No," she said, "we are going home." The journey to the capital took 2 weeks. Ilara had not seen the palace in 16 years, and every step closer felt like walking backward through time. She remembered the gardens where she had first fallen in love, the halls where she had once walked in secret, afraid of being seen. This time, she did not hide. She walked through the front gates with her children on either side of her, and she did not stop until she reached the throne room. Damien was in the middle of court business when the doors opened. He looked up, expecting another petitioner, another problem to solve. Instead, he saw a woman he had spent 16 years trying to forget, standing tall in the doorway with 2 teenagers beside her who bore his own eyes. The room went silent. For a long moment, Damien could not speak. He rose from his throne slowly, as though afraid that if he moved too quickly, the vision in front of him would disappear. "Ilara," he said, and her name came out rough, like something he had not allowed himself to say in years. "I never left you," she said, her voice steady despite the years of pain behind it. "I was taken from you, and I have carried your children in silence ever since, because I did not know if telling you the truth would keep them safe or get them killed." Seraphine, seated beside the throne, rose to her feet with fury spreading across her face. She began to speak, to deny, to twist the truth the way she always had, but Damien silenced her with a single look. He walked down from the throne, closing the distance between himself and the family he never knew he had, and when he reached them, he knelt in front of his children for the first time in their lives. The truth spread through the court like wildfire. 16 years of lies unraveled in a single evening, and Seraphine's carefully built world began to crumble around her. But she was not willing to lose everything without a fight. She had spent 16 years buying loyalty from packs across the northern territories, promising favors, marriages, and land in exchange for support. Now faced with losing her throne, she called on every debt she was owed. Within days, the kingdom split in 2. Packs loyal to the Ashgrave bloodline rallied around Damien, Ilara, and the twins, while packs bound to Seraphine's promises refused to accept that their queen was being cast aside. What had begun as a family's painful reunion became the spark for a conflict that spread across the entire territory, as old grudges and new loyalties collided in ways no one could control. Damien did not want war. He tried, in the early days, to reason with the packs who had turned against him, to explain that Seraphine's claim to the throne had been built on lies from the very beginning. But fear and ambition are powerful things, and many packs were more afraid of losing what Seraphine had promised them than they were willing to accept the truth. When diplomacy failed, Damien made the hardest choice of his life. He called his loyal packs to arms, not to conquer, but to protect the family that had finally been returned to him. Kale and Ren, thrust suddenly into a war neither of them had asked for, had to learn quickly what it meant to carry royal blood. They trained alongside seasoned warriors, pushing their bodies and their newly discovered abilities to the limit. Ren, quiet and thoughtful like her mother, became a skilled strategist, often finding solutions that seasoned generals had overlooked. Kale, fierce and protective, became a formidable fighter, driven by a need to keep his mother and sister safe after everything they had endured. The fighting stretched across the territory for months, moving through border villages, mountain passes, and eventually toward the capital itself. Ilara, though not a fighter by nature, worked tirelessly as a healer during the conflict, tending to wounded soldiers on both sides whenever she could, refusing to let the war erase the compassion that had defined her entire life. Her presence on the battlefield became its own kind of symbol, a reminder to everyone watching that this war had begun not out of ambition, but out of a mother's desperate fight to protect her children. Slowly, the tide began to turn. As the conflict dragged on, cracks began to show in Seraphine's alliance. Pax, who had once trusted her, began to question the promises she had made, especially as the truth of her 16-year deception spread further and further. One by one, her allies began to abandon her, unwilling to keep fighting for a cause built on lies that grew harder to defend with each passing day. The final confrontation came at the edge of the capital, where Seraphine made her last attempt to hold on to power. But by then, she stood with only a fraction of the forces she once commanded, most of her allies having quietly withdrawn in the days before. When she finally faced Damien, Ilara, and their children, she saw clearly what she had refused to accept for 16 years. The throne had never truly been hers to keep. The war ended not with a grand battle, but with Seraphine's surrender, her power broken by the very lies she had used to build it. In the aftermath, the kingdom that had been torn apart began the long process of healing. Damien named Ilara his true and rightful queen, a title she had been denied for 16 years, and he named Kale and Ren as his heirs, the children who had grown up hidden and were now stepping into roles they had never expected to hold. The road to rebuilding was not easy. Trust between Pax had to be rebuilt slowly. Wounds from the war needed time to heal, and the scars of 16 years of separation could not be erased overnight. But for the first time in a very long time, Ilara felt something she had almost forgotten how to feel. Peace. Not the fragile peace built on secrets and lies that had defined the kingdom for so long, but something real, something earned. Years later, people across the Blackthorn territories would tell the story of the healer's girl who vanished, carrying the Alpha King's twins, and how her return had sparked the bloodiest war the kingdom had ever known. But those who knew the full story understood it differently. It was not a story about war. It was a story about a mother who never stopped protecting her children, and a love that endured 16 years of silence, only to return stronger than the lies that had tried to bury it. And in the halls of the palace where it had all begun, Ilara Voss finally stood exactly where she had always belonged, not hidden in the shadows, but beside the man she loved, with her children at her side, and a kingdom that had, at long last, learned the truth.